Presiding Officer, let's not dance about it. These welfare reforms are appalling. Shamelessly trying to balance the books on the back of the sick and disabled is just not plausible. If I channel Mr Kinnock from a previous conference debate that I remember well, this is coming from a Labour government abandoning the most vulnerable. Strategies Labour used to oppose when it was the Tories in charge, they now enthusiastically support in cuts to social security. The only change I see is the final erosion of Labour values. Presiding Officer, these cuts will hurt hard the people in my Motherwell and Militia constituency. And I quote, "Partly owing to our industrial heritage, my constituency had relatively high levels of disability and chronic illness as a result of old injuries and from those days. And that has made my community particularly vulnerable to welfare cuts." Not my words, Presiding Officer, the words of Labour MP for Airdrie at the time and now Labour MP for Motherwell, Wishaw and Carluke, Pamela Nash. But those words of condemnation of cuts came when it was George Osborne and the Tories cutting critical social security support for disabled people. Now that it's the Labour Party doing it, so many Labour MPs have abandoned their principles and their constituents. I've been accused of scaremongering on this issue. This is not about scaremongering. This is about standing up for people who are facing the imposition of poverty by design and by Labour. Are anti-poverty charities scaremongering? Are sick and disabled people who fear for their financial security scaremongering? It bears repeating that the UK Government's own analysis has shown that their welfare cuts will push 250,000 people into poverty, including 50,000 children. The Resolution Foundation said that the cuts would result in between 800,000 and 1.2 million people losing support of between 4,200 and 6,300 a year by 2930. This is falling hard on disabled families. And from the previous work in this Parliament on the Tories' welfare reform, we know the impact that this significantly has on single-parent families too. Many of whom are women. Evidence from Citizens Advice Network in Scotland shows that disabled people are already finding their income is not enough to live on. The proposed reforms will result in a reduction of £5 billion in social security expenditure. In the words of Citizens Advice Scotland, this will further entrench the disproportionate impact of poverty and destitution on disabled people. It will also result in costs elsewhere in society: crisis care, breakdown of care packages, NHS, poverty and homelessness. We've become too used to talking about mitigation in this chamber. I've often talked about it under the guise of devolution. The notion that devolution is about making different policy choices. But some of the unionist persuasion often make the argument that, while casually ignoring the impact of budgetary decisions made at a UK level on Scotland, the UK Government's cut spending is a reduction in Scotland's spending, and we're just told to lump it. We have become almost numb to the concept of mitigating the worst impacts of Westminster policy decisions. So what real choice do we have? We can't abandon people to the worst excesses of the UK austerity, so we have to spend that money, but it comes at a cost to our fixed budget. Labour could end that cycle by taking meaningful actions on policies which are driving people into poverty. But instead, they have chosen to cut, just like their Tory predecessors. And Labour's rhetoric treats people with hostility and suspicion, rather than with compassion or respect. In the last 14 years, the SNP Scottish Government has invested a staggering £1.2 billion shielding Scots from the worst impacts of Westminster policy. Discretionary housing payments, the Scottish Welfare Fund, money advice services, universal credit for Scotland's choices. We invest in the programmes that counter the bedroom tax, the benefit cap and the worst of Westminster austerity. austerity, and we brought in the Scottish Child Payment to lift children out of poverty. Now Labour is choosing to push children into poverty. Is this the limit of their ambition when they are in power? But there's another aspect of all of this. When we talk about, yes, getting more people into economic activity would be good. Yes, it will be of benefit to people who will find that independence through the working process. But when we stand back and blame them and not ask the question as to why inequality is rising, this is not an impact on everyone equally. The rich are getting richer, and Labour have chosen to try and balance the book on the backs of the most vulnerable. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Adamson.